So, this week, did we advance the plot? No. Did we learn anything about anyone important? Not really. Was this basically filler? Yes. Did we even get that interesting a fight? No. Having said that, I had a really good time with this episode. And even though nothing I talk about will be really relevant to the actual story or structure or anything like that, I want to take a few minutes to talk about why I think this week's Card Fight Vanguard episode is the single best teaching episode in toy shonen history. And I know that's kind of a weird claim to make, but what I hate, because every toy commercial type anime will always take an episode at the beginning of the season to kind of explain the rules, like kind of get everyone up to date, fill in anyone who might be new, all that good stuff, and also come up with a convoluted excuse for why spending so much time playing these games is a good idea. And most of them kind of fall flat because most of the time it does feel cynical and like the moral reason is forced. Also, a lot of times the main character will just sort of shout and just explain things in this very general way that you don't feel like really gets you anywhere. Yu-Gi-Oh! Half the time doesn't even bother doing this. But what I loved about this episode was that it really made teaching Vanguard fun. And it did it in a real smart way. First up, let's start off right at the beginning. First up, I love Aichi's narration at the opening scene. I don't know why. That was just kind of a fun change of pace. But when we see the student council learning how to play and the way they go about it, that's a fun bit because it feels very realistic. A lot of times when kids are trying to learn card games, you have that one person who knows a lot of the rules, has seen enough of how the game works to explain it, but she didn't know how to teach it. She was just kind of like, do this, don't do that, hold that. She wasn't very friendly. She wasn't very inviting. Another thing I really liked about this episode is that the 3 student council members were given very well-defined personalities. That'll play a little more in later. But first up, I like that idea that the one who looks like she would be that sort of strict was strict about it. I like that idea that that there is a difference between knowing something and being able to interpret it, being able to explain it, because the way she taught things was getting everyone nowhere. And I quite like that. And then you have Aichi come in. First up, I like Aichi has his standard shonen moment where when the guy knocks Vanguard, Aichi's like, no, it is important. And I like that it then quickly brings it back. Like, I could see him having that little outburst of, don't screw with my thing, but then it brings it back to a way that is uniquely Aichi. And Aichi's explanation had this very nice earnestness to it. It really felt like, for starters, you have the 50-episode history of this kid getting bonds and having friends through Vanguard. So you have that history, but also his explanation had this very just straight from the heart feel to it. It wasn't a big yelling like, this is my life and my soul is dedicated to this. It was like, no, I've made friends with this. You can communicate with people through this. I personally grew because of this. That's nice. And then we move on to the actual coaching thing. I sort of feel like Aichi took this on, because he could easily have just said no, so that way they have a better chance of winning the whole thing later. But by saying yes, I think Aichi is trying to show them why Vanguard is fun, and why just having social hobbies, not everything has to be about global, or whatever the fuck that's supposed to be about. Not everything has to be about that. You can just have fun with friends. And that's what I think Aichi is trying to convey to these guys. So then we get the actual teaching fight, and just a perfect, well-done contrast in the way Aichi explains Vanguard. Aichi's voice actor has always done a good job with giving Aichi this very sort of, I don't want to use the term motherly, especially when you see half the fan art of this character, but I feel like Aichi's voice actor has always done a good job of making Aichi's voice very soothing, very kind of relaxing, has this very nice warmth to it. I don't know if what I'm saying is going to make a lot of sense, but basically what I'm saying is when Aichi is teaching stuff, you kind of want to listen. He's just so friendly about it. And he just kind of takes them through it step by step. He's not just being like, this is how this works, this is how it works. He's taking the time to explain why this does this, how this advances your game state, why this is the right move to make. I also like the idea that he takes abilities out of it. Like, the cards don't use their effects until later. This is smart, because going back to Yu-Gi-Oh! For a minute, in their season premieres for each arc, not only do they not explain the rules, but except for, like, Zexal, or Zale, or... now you've all got me confused how to say it. The fourth one, except for that one, the first episode always just jumps right into something crazy, and only really ever explains how the new summoning condition works. They never really take that time to explain why this is a good idea, why these plays are done the way they're done. But here it was a very straightforward, you put the unit back here because it'll give it power, you guard here so that way you can conserve damage, you use counterblasts like this, you use grade 3s like this. And what was sort of good was all three of their personalities, the student council, always stayed in the fight, which I quite liked. I like the fact that the main guy, it sort of represented three archetypes of people who get into card games. I already talked about the girl, but if we're talking about, like, the president, he was sort of like okay, now I know everything. Take the training wheels off, Mom. It's time. Like, that was fun. Like, that is a very real thing you see with kids who get into card games. And then you have the guy we're fighting, a glasses dude, and he's just kind of, like, lost. But then, like, as he gets more into it and gets more understanding of how the game works, he starts having more fun as he starts being able to make plays for himself. And then when they brought effects into it, that was just kind of a fun little thing. Just like, okay, we know what we're doing, and all three of them were on the same page, and they made sure to show that all three of them were having fun. It's not about saving the world. It's not about getting over past trauma. It's not about this. It's not about that. At its core, card games should just be about having fun. And that's what the whole thing tried to signify. That is the point. And I thought it was just a really fun, creative way to do it. Also, Aichi finally used Monarch Sanctuary Alfred's gaining a crit effect. You know, the thing we actually use it for. So yeah, all in all, this is not a super important episode. This is not by any stretch like the defining episode of the series. But in a world where I've seen a lot of these types of shows and seen how often they fail at really making you understand A, how you're supposed to play it, and B, why it's a good idea to pick this up as a hobby, I thought this was a really fun way to go about it. So, all in all, that was my thoughts on this week's episode. Nothing too in-depth, but maybe there is something in-depth about just what it means to be a good teacher. That sounded cheesy. Anyways, so Vanguard question of the week. Bermuda is here, and it's going to be making a splash in the meta. See what I did there? Puns! And so I've got my team league coming up this weekend. I'll be attending the team league over in White Plains, New York. And so I want to know, what do you think will be the big, like, 3 clans you'll see on every team? Obviously, Bermuda's going to be one, because from what I'm hearing, the format is sort of turning into Bermuda and everything else. So I'm guessing Bermuda. My personal 3 predictions is a lot of Bermuda, a lot of Shadows, and the third is kind of a wild card. I want to say Golds, but as I've seen from testing the deck out myself, Golds, when they don't get their right combo, are kind of just dead. So I think that third slot is kind of the wild card, which is normal when you're making a team type thing. But tell me what you think below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next week for the actual mini tournament thing.